Welcome to Applicant Tracking Systems. My name is Kay Gruder. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm Assistant Director of Graduate Student and Postdoc Career Programs and Services at UConn Center for Career Development at the STORS campus. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple of items so you know how to participate in the webinar. Just going to go back a screen here. You should see your attendee interface. Usually it's on your desktop in the upper left corner. So you'll have the opportunity to submit questions by typing your questions into the chat pane of the control panel. And you can send your questions at any time during the presentation. This is a previously recorded webinar, and the questions will be emailed to me and answered within 3 to 5 business days. And also, at the end of today's webinar, you'll receive a short evaluation, and it's helpful for me to know if you've learned something or found the topic of value. And additionally, you'll be emailed a copy of the webinar typically about 24 hours after the session. So in this webinar, we will cover content that provides an overview of some of the aspects of applicant tracking systems, and I'll cover how to optimize your application documents and your content to successfully move your application through the applicant tracking systems. And we'll review what are applicant tracking systems, where will you encounter them, what are they tracking. You'll have a chance to see a couple of different employer views of what they see on their side of the applicant tracking system. And I'll show you, I'll also provide some tips for optimizing your application materials and your LinkedIn presence for ATS, and some resources to further support your learning and knowledge on this topic. Let's get started with a review of what applicant tracking systems are. So these are software applications that manage applications and applicants from as early as first point of inquiry about a position all the way through to hiring. And the systems also collect, sort, scan, and rank job applications based on the match of the application materials to the job posting. There are also communication systems during all phases of application and hiring, so they can generate emails that tell applicants that they've been rejected from a position or that they've been moved on to maybe a first round interview and so on. And they can also provide an onboarding function for the employer, providing a new hire with access to employment forms and company information. There's systems that are heavily relied upon by nearly all companies. And it's really important to know that the system reviews your application documents like your CV or resume, your cover letter. It may also check your LinkedIn profile before a human ever sees your application. So it's key to optimize your documents to get through the system so that a human can review your application. Where are these systems? They're nearly everywhere, and there are hundreds of different systems. You can sometimes see the applicant tracking system in the URL of the job posting or in the online application window. And here's one example. So this is a job posting for NPR, which is National Public Radio. And you can see up here with the yellow highlight that there's something called recruitingultipro.com in the URL. And that actually alerts us that an ATS is being used, an ATS called UltiPro or Recruiting UltiPro. And then here, let's look at this. This is a job posting for a position at Pfizer. And this one shows myworkdayjobs.com, which is yet another system. There are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of different systems. And then sometimes you'll also see other indicators on an application page, like it might say something like powered by Kronos or powered by Teleonet, and these are also applicant tracking systems. So it's really best to just assume that an employer is using an ATS unless you know that you're sending your application to an actual person's email address. What are ATS tracking? Employers have many filters on which they can set their applicant tracking systems. They can determine which keywords in the job posting they seek candidates to match. They can weight or give priority to various keyword matches. They're tracking how often applicants apply to the company and what the results of those past applications have been. They're matching the application content, resume, CV, cover letter, online application form, also the digital presence like LinkedIn, to criteria established by the employer relevant to the job posting. There are dozens of search filters and what are called knockout questions, and I'm going to show you an example of one of those that can be selected by the employer. And I have a chart here that includes some of those filters and knockout questions. So the system can be set up certainly to search for keywords and phrases. It can have a question about work authorization. It can be searching on skills. It can also search for individuals based on the schools that they've attended. It can be set up to search within a geographic location or radius from the company. It can search your LinkedIn presence. It can search your years of experience, your specific degree. It can contain information about whether you're referred to a position, whether you've worked for a competitor, what some of your past job titles have been, and much, much more. I thought I'd share this infographic just to further demonstrate how ATS work. So in this illustration, you can see that 250 resumes were sent for a single position. The ATS scanned the documents for whatever criteria the employer was seeking, and 75% of the applications were, looks like, rejected, and just 25% were moved through the system for a human being to review. And then only 4 to 6 end up being called for an interview, and then one person is offered the job. And there's a ranking typically of the other top candidates in case the number one candidate declines the offer. All right, so in these next two slides, I have some screenshots of what employers can see and do within a couple of different ATS platforms. So we're looking behind the scenes now at how an employer can use these systems. So in this slide, you can see that there are knockout questions that can disqualify a candidate from moving further in the application process. Over here, we're under question, we have number 3, and it says, are you comfortable interfacing directly with customers? And apparently the applicant said no. And then we can see out here to the right in the result column that the candidate is in fact disqualified. And you can also see some other ranking measures on the left side of the screen, and the employer can email the candidate directly from the system and also see if the candidate had a referral and so on. So you can see some of that on the left-hand side over here, some additional rankings. And you can also see up here that the candidate can be emailed, and then there's some tabs here about the candidate's history applying to the company and whether the candidate has been referred. In the next slide, the employer can view the candidate's resume and also see the various emails. So over on this left-hand side, we can see the various emails that have occurred between the candidate and the employer. And it also states up above here under the candidate's picture, the source that the candidate came from. So in this case, it was a job fair. And you can see that the employer can view the candidate's LinkedIn, Facebook, and other social media platforms. So right above the resume here. And the system is also keeping track, as shown on the right side of the screen, which parts of the application and interviewing processes have been completed. So you can see that the candidate completed their video screening and answered some job screening questions and so on. So it's pretty extensive when you start to dive into these systems and see all the information that the employer is gathering. And the name of the Applicant Tracking System is right up there in the top left corner. ICIMS is the system there. Now I'm going to move on into sharing some tips to optimize your application materials for ATS, and this includes any materials that you upload as part of your application. So when applying to a job, you'll want to make a list of the keyword skills qualifications that are mentioned in the job posting, and you want to try for a minimum 50% match, but we also know that a higher match is better, somewhere in 70% is pretty good in terms of getting through many systems. You want to mention keywords more than once in your application, but you don't want to overuse them. And I'm going to touch upon this a bit later in the webinar. You want to keep your overall format simple. Students will often say to me, oh, this is my boring version of my resume or CV that I'm uploading. You want to keep the font simple, use Microsoft Word, no tables, no borders, avoid lines, and use a traditional bullet point, but not like something more fancy. You want to use very common content headings. So you can just use the word experience, skills, education. If you were sending your document to a human, you could use more expansive content headings in your resume or CV, but for the applicant tracking systems, simple is better. And I do recommend that you add a qualifications section with bullet point statements relevant to the position, because this is an opportunity to get those keywords in to your document more than once. All right, so let's break from the tips, and we're going to look at a job posting. And so when you review a job posting, it might first seem like just a lot of information. And in my work with individuals, I find that a lot of times they're only looking at the qualifications and the required skills. But when you're optimizing for ATS, it's really imperative to read through the entire job posting. And in scanning this job posting, we see a section on principal responsibilities. We see a section on qualifications and required skills. And the way to decode a job is to really read through the job posting and note keywords, knowledge, experience, skills that the employer seeks. And also take note of words and phrases that appear in the job posting multiple times. So as an example, if you read a job posting and you see the word collaborate mentioned multiple times, then you can be pretty certain that the ATS will be searching for that word. And ATS, as I mentioned earlier, also like finding a word or phrase multiple times, especially when it's like organic to the document. So maybe you used a software in a project, and maybe it appears in one of your bullet point statements in your experience section, and then maybe that same software also appears in your skills section. So if it's a software that's mentioned in the job posting, it's actually really a plus to have it appear in more than one place. Now I'm going to switch to how this posting was decoded. So in this slide, you can see how the job was decoded for keywords and phrases, and we can see that team and collaborate and collaborative team show up in the principal responsibilities section and also in the required skills. We also see that literature analysis shows up, and somewhere in here we have literature searches, manuscripts, literature searches, and evaluation up there in the principal responsibilities. So really by decoding the job posting, you can begin to see the areas within the position that seem to be of particular importance to the employer. And, certainly all of these other keywords are important as well. So you don't want to lose sight of those, and you definitely want to address the qualifications and those required skills in your materials by mentioning those keywords where you can. All right, so now let's return to some of the key tips. Oh, I'll just mention something here that a lot of times individuals that I work with will say, well, what's the best keyword scanner? What's the product out there that can do this for me? And really, I always say that you are potentially the best keyword scanner. You can do a search on the internet to find the different there are free keyword scanners out there. So you can do a search to find them, search resume keyword scanner or free resume keyword scanner. But often you and including a friend, you can both go through a job posting and begin to identify keywords and what seems to be of particular importance to the position or role. And just remember, read through that entire job posting. So everything that is printed, written in the posting about the company, about the position, and so forth. All right, now we'll return to some key tips to optimize your application materials. You want to keep content relevant, as irrelevant content can lower your score. So keep the content in your resume or CV relevant to the job posting, so that some irrelevant content isn't like a distraction to your matching with the position. Upload the document in whatever format is specified. So typically when you go to upload a resume, a CV, or a cover letter, it will actually say you can upload this as a doc or a PDF. If it doesn't say, I would tend to lean towards a doc. Make sure your LinkedIn is up to date and that it incorporates some of the key words. And I'm going to give you some tips specific to that in a bit. And on your resume CV, use month and year dates. This is the preferred format for most applicant tracking systems. So when you're putting the dates of your experiences or participation in things, you want to use the month and year dates. And then additionally, a lot of these systems have an online application where you are answering some additional questions, as we saw earlier in the slides. So you want to make sure you complete all fields in the online application. All right, continuing with tips. You want to use acronyms and abbreviations that are mentioned in the job posting and also spell out those acronyms as well. So I'm just using CPA, which stands for Certified Public Accountant, and this is how you would want to note it in your resume or CV. So you could put CPA. So let's say the job posting said the person must be a CPA. Then you would use CPA, but you would also use the word certified public accountant. Basically, again, you want to match whatever is noted in the job posting. You want to remove typos because ATS will not read a misspelled word. So if you misspelled the word collaborate, but you collaborated, if it is misspelled, the applicant tracking system is not going to pick up that word in your document. There are fonts that are called like web safe fonts. And so I've mentioned some of those here, Georgia, Arial, Courier, Calibri, and so forth. And then some people have thought like, oh, I could hide some of those keywords in a white font in my document and no one will ever know, but the applicant tracking system will see them. Don't do that. Those systems actually can tell if you have hidden keywords in white font. So don't be tempted to take that approach. And then you also want to really name your file clearly. So the file that you're uploading or the documents that you're uploading, name them very clearly with your name. You can also include the type of document in the name of the file. And then it's great to also put the name of the employer in your file name. So knowing that some ATS also check for a candidate's LinkedIn and look at the content of the LinkedIn profile, you'll also want to add some keywords to your profile if they aren't already in there. And the primary sections where we recommend that you do that are in your headline, and that's the line directly under your photo. And then in your summary or about section, you can add keywords there. And then within your experience and skills section. Okay. And the Center for Career Development provides LinkedIn consultations. So if you'd like to schedule an appointment, you could do so to gain some additional guidance on optimizing your LinkedIn. And I'm just going to pop back here. I've also included a few different resources, and you'll be able to access these on your own to support your learning on this topic. And this wraps up applicant tracking systems. And as a final note, a brief evaluation will pop up at the end of the webinar, and you will be emailed a recording in the next 24 hours. So all the best as you continue with your career preparation.